It's our weekly sports episode. Well, you might as well call it our infamous podcast about sports and stuff. Where on this podcast, you get to hear a little bit of information about what's going on in the sports world, what's going on in the video game world, a little bit of the technology information, get a little bit of a music knowledge chat. Two of our personal faves that we do on the show, the artist spotlight, and of course the infamous ass of the week. So stick around. You might actually enjoy the episode. Episode 130 of the past. We are doing another episode this week. By we I mean me. I'm your host BT. Flying solo today. I've had to push back. Had a little bit of things going on with life, and among other things, just transition. So, as with anything, the show must go on. I won't have my co-host with me. I'm kind of saddened by it, but you can't get too devastated. You just kind of learn to, as life calls it, just pick up the pieces and move forward. So, very packed show today. I got a few things to iron out. You know, as we always call it, the house rules. Going to that first, jump right into the topics, and hopefully we should have a good show today. Today's podcast, or as the podcasts are recalled each week, they are hosted and posted on Spreaker.com. If you want to go back and listen to any previous episodes, the links are in the description. And if you're looking to do podcasting, I would suggest starting with Spreaker. If you're also looking to do any shows as far as posting or getting a good microphone, I would definitely recommend the Blue Yeti microphone. That's kind of been my go-to for a while, and it's kind of been the old saying of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I just kind of stuck with that and let that kind of fly out and ride out. So quite a heavy list of topics to get into. One thing I do want to talk about before I go any further, this month is, and it's ironic because the podcast initially was planned to be recorded on Saturday, but I ended up doing it on Sunday. So each of the episodes are recorded to, on those, and it was supposed to be in September. October, as many of you may or may not be aware of, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So I will be having on my personal page, Bright82, and I may post them on my podcast page as well. But I'll be posting different quotes as far as related to domestic violence. So I want to make sure I get that out of the way and address that before continuing any further. So we're not going to waste any time. We'll get into it. Like I said, it's a huge list of topics, quite a bit to discuss and go into. So without any further ado, I'm just going to jump right into it. So this week is yet another week of weekly picks. My co-host did decide, in the spirit of continuing the trend, he went ahead and sent me his list of picks. Before we continue with that, I do want to at least address, I don't want to say the elephant in the room, but the obvious reality of picking teams. And that is that we did do picks for last week, and last week's picks were not the greatest. I should have actually counted up how many L's or how many W's ended up coming out from last week, because it was not really the most pretty of sights, but it went the way it did. Give me 1 second, because I know there's one game that I don't have, and I didn't even realize until I saw it just now. Let's see. So while I'm doing that, we do have, so one of the games to be fair, one of the games that is being played as far as with the Dolphins and the Saints, that game is currently being played. As I always tell y'all, the episodes are being recorded a week behind. Well, not a week behind, but a day out. So you'll get, the recording will be on today, but it will include all of the scores as far as for the overall standing. So I want to make sure that there's not any unbiased or unfair leverage as far as that goes. So Let me just get one thing pulled up and then I can confirm my information. Okay, so I did pick that game wrong. So going back to last week's games, we both did a bad job with picking teams. Dimitri did a little bit better than I did. He gave me his list. Normally we would get the information as to why teams were chosen. I'll make sure I have the overall standings for that soon. But without jumping too far ahead of the gun, we'll go ahead and do week 4 picks. So the first game, like I said, I sent him my result. I did actually send him a text saying that I would pick the Saints in that game between the Saints and the Dolphins. He actually chose the Dolphins for that game. So as of right now, I kind of have like a leverage on that game. And as we always make you aware, we usually avoid doing the Thursday night game based on the day of the week. So that, like I said, that may be changing. I've told you all about that before. So we'll kind of see how that pans out. Bills at Falcons. I am going to go Falcons. Of course, him being a home fan, he picked the Falcons as well. Browns at Bengals. Probably gonna be my wild card surprise pick. DeField went Bengals. Dimitri went Bengals. I'm actually going Browns. Rams at Cowboys, maybe game of the week. I'm actually going to take upset for that one as well and pick the Rams. He picked the Cowboys. Lions at Vikings. He chose the Vikings. I'm sorry, he chose the Lions. Excuse me. I'm actually going to choose the Lions as well for that game. Panthers at Patriots. I know it's probably going to be lack of loyalty. I'm actually going Patriots on that one. He chose the Patriots as well. Jags at Jets. Still the Jets. Not really much to say about that. So I'm picking the Jags. He also picked the Jags as well. Seattle at Baltimore should be a big game. I'm actually going to pick Ravens. Probably going to be a surprise pick, but, hey, just calling it for what it is. He chose the Steelers. Next game, Titans at Texans. I'm going to pick the Texans. He also chose Texans as well. 49ers at Cardinals. Still really not sure what we're going to see out of the 49ers yet. I'm picking the Cardinals for that game. He also chose the Cardinals as well. Eagles at Chargers. I'm going to surprise people and still go with the obvious and picking the Eagles. He chose the Eagles as well. Giants at Buccaneers. Might be the time for Eli to shine, so I'm going to give Eli a chance. If he blows it for me this week, then it is what it is. So I'll pick the Giants. He chose the Buccaneers. Then you have Raiders at Broncos. Normally I would pick the shot of going with the Broncos for this one, but I'm actually going to pick the Raiders. Just calling it for what it is, especially with last week being such a weird array of games. He chose the Broncos for that game. Colts at Seahawks. I'm actually going to pick the Seahawks. He chose Seattle as well. And for the Monday night game, Raiders at Chiefs, I'm going to choose the Chiefs, and he also chose the Chiefs as well. So as I always tell you all, I make sure that I have everything updated for those pickings and for choices, but wanted to make sure that I got those in and mixed for the overall week. So I'm not going to really surprise you all with a lot of stories, but I am. First thing I want to say is, before I get into the meat of this podcast, last week, as far as fantasy league goes, one of my fantasy league teams that I actually got my first win. Whoop whoop. And oddly enough, it was against my co-host. So I was able to get that win. And we actually were finished with scores and points for games by Sunday. So we didn't have anybody from the Monday night games at all. This week, I'm kind of starting off rough in that series or in that league. And in the other league, I'm not going to say that I've given up, but I'm kind of just, as I call it, the buffer. You always have that one person who plays and participates. Not looking at it as, hey, I'm doing this for participation points, but it just was stuck with being the way it is. So I'm not really too devastated or destroyed by it. I just kind of let it be what it is. So like I said, I'm coasting along with that league because I'm part of it, but it's going to be a long, bumpy road ahead is the nicest way to put it. So if you have been under a rock or if you haven't been keeping up with sports, primarily the NFL, it's kind of occurred in the WNBA. It's also occurred with the NBA is kind of getting their eyes in this as well. There has been big stories of big news about players deciding to take a knee or kind of deciding not to participate during the national anthem, whether that's, as I mentioned, taking a knee, not really being a part of it, or not being on the field at all. The WNBA did their part. It was kind of like a best of both worlds. I'll get into that in a moment. But the NFL players decided to take a knee and kind of join in unity with it being processed with Trump's approach to the league as far as their option to protest. It's mainly looked at as all of this has been triggered from what's going on with Colin Kaepernick and his stance on deciding to not stand or not participate during the national anthem, and a lot of teams have followed suit. More of it coming recently amid the stories in the media with Donald Trump giving his input on athletes participating and feeling as though if they don't do it, that they should be kicked out or things of that nature. From what I've gathered, it looks like the NFL, between the players and the team and the owners, as well as the commissioner, they've all kind of come together and they're trying to come to an agreement on having this be handled accordingly and still not having impact what matters most, which is the fans. There was a story that I'll get into later involving DirecTV, where a lot of fans had a little bit of an attitude about this occurring. So we'll just keep an eye on that as well. I'm going to say this about what they're doing. And this is something that is kind of going to come down to as the saying goes, damned if you do, damned if you don't. As a player or as a person, you have a right to do what you choose to do as an athlete or as an individual. What the challenge of the conflict becomes with the media and with the leagues is when something gets done and it's quote unquote considered bigger than what's going on around you. Meaning in the NFL, it's always about the shield. It's never going to change. If you do anything that becomes bigger than the shield, then there's a conflict. I may have talked about this in last week's podcast, so if I'm beating a dead horse, hold it to my head. Don't take it personal. It's just me talking about how I look at it or how I feel about the whole circumstance and situation. The tough part about this story is that it really does impact more people than we realize, because we just look at it as, they're taking a stand and they're, progressing and constituting their right to not participate during the national anthem. And what's tough about it is, everyone looks at it as if it's tradition, you stick to doing it and it shouldn't be a big deal. But in reality, these people are given that option or that choice to decide if I want to participate in it, I can. If I choose not to, then it shouldn't be held against me either. I was talking with somebody about this a couple of days ago, and I've always come back to this story because this is kind of the constant of the full story. And that is, if we go back and look at the NBA when Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf did it, aka Chris Jackson, there wasn't much controversy or much conversation made about it back then because it was occurring and it went on, but it didn't get half of the attention that it's getting now. So here we are, we fast forward a couple of decades later, and you have someone doing a similar stance or similar action. And I'm not going to say he's being chastised for it, but it's almost as though the NFL, a lot of people feel like he's being blacklisted or blackballed for not being given an opportunity to play solely based on his choice or his opportunity that he feels is his right to do what he's doing. So tying, and I mentioned this before, so I'll talk about WNBA in a moment because I did add that story. I initially sent this to my co-host, but I didn't have it as one of my tabs. But I did find this story to be intriguing from my sports group. So shout out to the sports group that I'm with on Facebook. Y'all know what time it is. We always talk and y'all get up with sports all the time. And this story was definitely no exception. Before I get into that story, I'm going to say this. If you go back and look at this story is gonna be addressed and is gonna come up with any league or with any entity of the game, meaning football, baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, etc. Soccer, you may or may not get a lot of attention about it because soccer kind of has a very brief and simple intro from what I've gathered. It can vary by team or vary by location. In NASCAR, not to be funny, NASCAR is going to be business as usual. There's not going to be much of a modification or change involving what the NFL or what players are deciding to do as far as standing for their rights or for their beliefs. Tying back into the WNBA, it's a much larger. So the WNBA, what they decided to do is that the women's it was game. I believe it was, they were stating it was game one. I believe it was game one of the tournament of the WNBA finals. The Minnesota Lynx played the LA Sparks, and basically the Minnesota Lynx kind of followed suit of the Minnesota Vikings as far as they all came together and locked hands, and they just stood together in unity. And that's mainly what it's about, is just coming together in unity and being on one accord. The Los Angeles Sparks, however, decided to go a different avenue, and they chose to, instead of standing during the national or being out during the national anthem, they actually stayed in the back. The entire team, coaching staff, everyone. And after the anthem was over, they all came out. And when they came out, because the game, of course, was in Minnesota, they came out to a bunch of boos, which I understand that you're booing them for them making their decision, but I also feel like they took their stand and they're doing, it's a silent protest. Like, you don't want, it's almost like it's a double-edged sword. It's on one hand, you look at it as, we don't want athletes to have an opinion or have a voice. So if they sit and they give their opinions and they talk about different things, they're too opinionated and they have too much input. Then the other side of it is, okay, they're not making a boisterous approach towards this, but they're also gaining attention that we don't want towards our league or towards our sport or towards our God forgive brand. And having those processes of pieces come into play, it then causes the teams to look at it as it generates friction where there shouldn't be friction, if that's a good way to put it. And personally, that's just not right. And I feel as though we can always move ahead, but it always are little things that are going to put us behind, and this is a prime example. So that's just my personal take on it. I don't feel there's ever going to be a right way of viewing how our First Amendment or first right or personal right of freedom of speech is given or expressed or addressed. But I feel like what they're doing is the first step in the right direction. I feel as though they are definitely working their hardest to make sure, like, everyone who's participating or a part of this knows that it's bigger than the sport. Like, regardless of what athletes do or don't do, whether they participate in national anthems, protests, or whatever, people are still getting killed. Folks are still, there's still police brutality going on. And I know, as I say all the time on multiple podcasts, I'm not here to do the political back and forth because that's not how this podcast functions. But I also know that if there are issues going on in the world, we can't avoid them or can't hide from them. And one of those issues, like I talked about earlier in the show, is about domestic violence. Regardless of how much we don't want to address or deal with it, it's still here. It's still in existence. There are people who still are not getting the help or assistance they need to get through whatever personal issues they have going on. As far as police, like, I'll say this about from the police brutality perspective, and then I'll wrap it up. I feel as though policemen have a unique position in their location, because there are some policemen who are in various areas who know and understand, hey, black men, black women may be doing X, Y, and Z, but just because we see them doing something, it shouldn't be assumed automatically that they're in this location when they're not, or because they're in this neighborhood, they're considered a risk, or they're considered a threat, or they're considered a target. A lot of black men and women have education. A lot of black men and women are doing things for themselves even without having an education. And if it's assumed or looked at it as you're a black person, he's a thug, he's a hood, whatever, that's you perceiving a person instead of giving time to actually learn and figure out who they are. It's the worst thing in the world. It's one of the worst feelings in the world when you're driving and you just are going somewhere. You be going somewhere just to go to the store, and you're being profiled for something that you didn't even do. I personally was profiled years ago, and thankfully it hasn't happened as much recently. But just the fact that it happens is it's a frustrating thing to go through, because you have a cop that's following you, not telling you what you're being followed for. And they can't tell you because it ain't like they can sit and like put a bullhorn up and say, "Sir, we're following you for a taillight," or whatever the case may be. Or it could come down to, like, with my circumstance, with the incident that happened with me was very like a definite one-off, because I was driving, and at a certain point I had a little speed burst. Went a little bit above the speed limit. Fine, no problem. As I continued, it wasn't the fact that he didn't even pull me over when it initially happened. He waited at least 5 or 6 blocks of continuous driving. Like, I was driving, still making turns, still going different directions, and he just followed me. And then after a certain point, he pulled me over. And by the time he pulled me over, he finally explained to me what was going on. Because, I mean, things happen. Like, I've had an incident very recent where I was followed for a turn that I wasn't aware of, and it was a misinterpretation. Point being is, just because something happens doesn't mean you have to make it into an awkward or uncomfortable situation. Like, just address what's going on. Let's get through the process of getting it taken care of and move forward. And I think sometimes people don't like to do that because they want to generate it to be more than what it is. And it shouldn't be that way. And that's the primary reason why Kaepernick took a knee and kind of started his protest the way he did. And a lot of athletes have followed suit, and a lot of people aren't fond of it, but it's his choice, and he made his decision. It's not really affecting him as a person. A lot of people look at it as whether it's affecting him as a player or an athlete, but I think it's underlying reasons that teams don't want to have him on their team, because they look at it as he's a he's a media liability, which some teams don't really think of that, but that's truly what it comes down to. So that's kind of where we are with that. You'll still see players and individuals participate according to that process. So that's just something to keep an eye on. And, I truly hope they get this resolved and get it taken care of in its proper manner. I mean, I feel like if it was me, I think the team should continue what they're doing as far as taking a knee and as far as making their approach towards how they handle the situation. And if it's bigger than the league, and I think the league needs to just let players do what they do and not sit and make a fuss about finding players. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I want to say the NBA is implementing their rule and making it aware that during the anthem that they are to participate as far as standing. Now, whether players do or don't stand, Adam Silver is going to be put in that position of having to think about that as well, and that's just the way it is. And that's part of being an owner. Owners are like, being an owner is like living in a place or living somewhere on your own or whatever. When you make decisions and rules, you make them on the fly, but you also make them according to the benefit of the situation. Like, I'll give this story, and I know this is like a lot more than I wanted to get into just about this portion of the story, but I wanted to address it anyway. When when I had an apartment, I would stay there, and everything was cool. I had someone come over and like hang out with me for the day or whatever. And while he was hanging out, we sitting there, we're chilling, having our little conversation. And he was like, "Yeah, I want to take a smoke. Is it all right if I smoke here?" I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." So in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, I don't smoke, and I really don't want to smoke in my house, but I need to, I don't want to tell him like he can't smoke. So what he decided to do, which was a logical thing, and that's pretty much was the consistent trend from that point after, if anybody was there, is you go out on the balcony, smoke, do whatever you want to do. You're not bothering me, no big deal. But as long as you keep it outside my house, I have no problem. And that was just something that kind of stuck and became a simple process along the way in hindsight. So that's just wanted to address that, and that was just kind of a story that kind of came up. One story that broke that a lot of people did not expect is that two players who were once teammates that won two championships out of 4 seasons decided to reunite, and as the song goes, reunited, and it feels so good. Dwayne Wade has joined forces with LeBron James, and they are now pursuing their quest for going for another championship. So it's, we all remember when they first joined together, and it was, it's a great combination of LeBron and D Wade, and it was LeBron, D Wade, Chris Bosh, and that was like we were looking forward to that and everything of that sort. So everything was, going well with that, and there was no big problems or big issues at that time. Now we fast forward a little bit, and as the saying goes, history repeats itself. So he did sign a 1-year deal. I believe it was for $2.4 million. Let me make sure I get the correct amount for that story, because that was that really caught a lot of the attention of a lot of players in the league. Let's see. Let me make sure I give the exact amount. I don't have it in this article. But yeah, so give you the short and simple version for this, and I'm sorry, normally I am ready to go with information of this sort, but it kind of was like it was a story, but it wasn't a story, only because they're on the same team. Props to them. It should be a good communication and good running of the mill. But the $1 million question is going to be: Will this connection generate a championship, or will it generate winning for that matter? The projected starting lineup that was presented is that it would be they're saying after Christmas, probably going into like near All-Star break. You're looking at Isaiah Thomas, Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, Kevin Love, and Tristan Thompson will be your starting 5. Your backups, you would have Iman Shumpert, Derrick Rose, J.R. Smith. Can't really think of many big men they have. They're looking at possibly trying to sign Andrew Bogut, I believe. You have a solid team. And you have Jay Crowder on their backup lineup. So it looks good on paper, but we talked about this last week with Carmelo Anthony going to Oklahoma. One player can make an impact, but it's a matter of where their next movement or what their next plans are with this lineup. It should be even more of an interesting factor, especially if you look at it as you have Kyrie on one side of the basketball, and then you got LeBron. You have Kyrie, Gordon Hayward, Al Horford, and you're looking at on the other end LeBron, D Wade, and Kevin Love. Not factoring in with Isaiah Thomas coming back, because he'll still be injured at start of the season. Side note, before I get into it or before I forget, the NBA did have their had the NBA preseason that started, so I didn't even realize that I factored in, because we are a couple of weeks from the NBA. So that has started. That ball has gotten rolling. A couple teams did have some good moments. They did show a bit of flash with Andre Iguodala as far as getting Paul Millsap to fall. So that was an unexpected occurrence. The odd part was they showed the crossover, but it was a unique situation because he crossed him over, but he missed the jump shot. So it's kind of like a $1 million crossover and a $5 jump shot, but that's just me being petty. So I am about to retire from podcasting as of today. After I read the story a couple of days ago, it confirmed that it's time for me to go into a new line of work, and I think I'm going to go back to being a basketball player. I know I'm not as young as Russell Westbrook is, but Russell Westbrook is going to possibly be one of the richest players in the NBA, if not the richest. He signed a 5-year, $205 million contract extension with the Oklahoma City Thunder. What makes this an interesting story and why it happened at such a unique moment is that it occurred on the same day as Kevin Durant's birthday. So for them to give an offer to him. Just it hit at a good time. They're breaking down the numbers and looking at it that he would earn $233 million, which is based on the contract extension, and then it would be a $28 million for his based on the salary that he currently would get this upcoming season. The salary for next season would be $35.3 million. When they broke it down based on numbers, you're looking at about $500,000 per game to play, which I have no problem with that. If you want to be honest. Excuse me. They were signing. They made that as a big deal, of a big opportunity, because you're looking at it as it's time to kind of make it clear where the team is focused or what their agenda is right now. And I mean, it's nothing against the lineup they have. They're primarily, I mean, they have a lineup. We're not downplaying that at all. Or I'm not downplaying that at all. I feel like it's coming down to making it clear that the future is Russell Westbrook. So they're putting the ball in his hands and letting him do what he does. I feel like they can have a strong winning record or winning aura in Oklahoma. Will it generate to them winning a championship, or could they beat the Warriors? That's kind of pushing it, but it still never hurts to try or go look at that possibility. So that's kind of how that story is going to pan out. I was able to catch a little bit of the NBA. I guess you can say it's the NBA press conference. This is a specific term they have for it, where they kind of go over the different things that are coming up for the upcoming season, and it's called the NBA Board of Governors. They did pass what's called a NBA a draft lottery reform, and it's definitely going to be something to look into and to think about over the upcoming seasons, because it will kind of cut back on teams deciding, hey, I'm going to go ahead and tank this season and have a bad record just so we can get the number one draft pick, because they don't want teams to do that anymore. And in all honesty, I personally don't blame them to doing that, only because when you do that, it generates, you don't get like the best quality out of your players. And I feel like as far as the team goes, as far as the NBA goes, you want it to be fair, you want it to be balanced. So, the 76ers we've been trusting the process. We trusted it long enough. And here it is 3 or 4 years later, we're still at square one and nothing has been accomplished. So what's going to happen is, initially the team with the lowest record had a 25% chance of getting the number one pick. Now it'll be a 14% chance. And those same odds are offered to the second worst record as well as the third worst record. So they all, there are 3 teams that now are in chase or in hunting of possibly getting the number one draft pick, which I don't have any problems or any personal vendettas against that, because it still comes out as a good thing for the league. Because let's say you have one of the top 3 picks, you could trade up and try to go for number one if there's a certain guy that you want to go for to get on your team. And it still works out good for the league, because even though the one and done you're getting some saturated players here and there, it still comes out to seeing quite a few decent players still make it, into the league. With next year's draft, you're looking at Michael Porter Jr., Marvin Bagley. There are quite a few big names that are coming that will be that'll be definitely making their mark when it comes to the NBA for next season. Let's see. They also talked about, and I don't have it on this page, but they did talk about the upcoming. As far as the salary cap, it will be increasing by a couple mil. They did also get into what I want to do, because I usually will have the NBA, the actual information from that, but that wasn't really a story that I looked at as being something to address this week, strictly because I expected it to be something talked about, but not really get a lot of attention or friction, in my opinion. let's see. Let me make sure I get the actual story. So they talked about so they broke. All right, sorry. So the joy of reading on the fly is a beneficial idea. So they talked about the lottery chances. They talked about player resting as far as giving, they want to agree on resting, having the process as far as resting players. Teams are prohibited from resting healthy players for any high-profile televised game. Any violation of this provision will constitute conduct prejudicial or detrimental to the NBA and result in a fine of at least $100,000. Absent unusual circumstances, a team should not rest multiple healthy players for the same game or rest healthy players when playing on the road. So, long story short, if you're looking at like the last couple of games, and let's say Cleveland plays against Milwaukee, and if LeBron's healthy, he should be playing or should be dressed to play. It shouldn't be based on, okay, we're resting him because we want to keep him on the shelf for the playoffs. Now that they've extended the season as far as the amounts of days to help the players out as far as home and homes and back-to-backs, it should help the players be able to kind of get through the 82-game stint. I feel like there was another story they talked about during this, but those are the main two things that they brought to the attention as far as the governors, the draft lottery system, and players' health being a big issue. I will say this, and I didn't really address it. I'm glad that the tanking rule is gone. There was Stan Van Gundy, oddly enough, the coach for the Detroit Pistons. He feels as though they should just go ahead and remove the draft altogether. But the only thing is, if you get players, how are you going to get them to different teams? Maybe I'm just looking at it wrong. It's just me thinking weird. So they have this could potentially have been asked a week, but I'm not going to put it as such because this was talked about a week. This was addressed nearly a week ago. As far as the NBA instituting was called the Zaza rule, which will take aim at reckless closeouts. If you go back and look at the NBA over the past couple of years, especially Draymond Green, LeBron James, players of that, Steven Adams, there's been a lot of blatant injuries or blatant harm towards players. The referees are going to be looking for players that slide under shooters on closeouts. There will also be an expansion to the referee's ability to replay those kind of calls and upgrade to a flagrant, like other normal flagrant foul calls, if the review shows malicious intent. Other rules being unofficially called the Harden rule. The other rule is being unofficially called the Harden rule and will attempt to prevent players from collecting cheap shooting fouls. It's an expansion of the change to the rip through move that was instituted recently by Kevin Durant. So I'm going to explain this to you all, a lot of you that may or may not watch, or may watch basketball but may not have thought about it. Kevin Durant would kind of get into a three-point stance as far as preparing to take a shot. And he would put the ball low enough, but he know that the player's hand would kind of be standing there in defensive motion. And he would just rip in the air like he was shooting a shot. And the player would basically get the ball, but if he got ball in his hand, it would present or be portrayed as if it was a foul. And he was getting a lot of fouls for that, and they kind of shut that down pretty quick. So they wanted to get rid of that rule. So they're trying to get the same thing in place as far as with James Harden, calling it the Harden rule. If a player is not... So this will kind of break it down as best as possible with the Harden rule. On the Harden rule, refs will be making distinction between fouls that occur on the drive or gather versus fouls on actual shooting motion. Short version, if a player has not yet gathered the ball when contact occurs, it's a common foul, not a shooting foul. Also, if refs determine that an offensive player lunged into defender or locked his arms to create contact, they could assess offensive foul. So that's what we have going on with that as far as for the foul or no foul rule. So now I'm going to, and I don't know why my tablet is acting up today. Like any other time, I get everything to come through just fine. Now we're going to get into a individual who is notated or termed as the con man. He is part of what has gone down with the NBA. I mean, with NCAA. NCAA basically, long story short, was considered to be part of a humongous sanction thanks to the FBI. The individual's name who was part of this is Louis Martin Marty Blazer III. He was supposed to be doing a whole bunch of foolishness, and it trickled into the NCAA basketball world. Blazer 46 proposed an experienced and corrupt financial advisor and business manager while helping the FBI make hundreds of recordings, a ruse resulting in a case charging 10 people, including coaches from Auburn, Southern California, Arizona, and Oklahoma State. The expanding ramifications of the probe were felt Wednesday when Louisville announced it was putting basketball coach Rick Pitino on unpaid leave in response to a related scheme, alleging that agents promised the family of a Louisville prospect it would get $100,000 from Adidas if he signed with the Adidas-sponsored school. They have also declined to discuss their arrangement with Blazer, and there was no immediate response to messages being left for a comment from his lawyer. A guilty plea to securities fraud and other charges that would buy him leniency shows that his cooperation played off of a pattern of deception dating back to 2000. So we're going back 17 years. When prosecutors say he began paying college athletes to get them to retain his company as a financial advisor or business manager. He's mainly been participating with... It's almost the saying of looking at it as a college student. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine the past couple of days about this. As a college student, you are basically getting a scholarship to play sport. There are pros and cons to that. The pro is, as long as you attend that school, you don't pay a dime for tuition, room and board, food, things of that nature. Now, any living or survival or having to, if you want to stay off campus or get around town, things of that nature, you are on your own. So here's where the problem comes in. Let's say you play for University in Kentucky. Let's say you were the number one draft pick in an NBA draft a couple of years ago. While you attended the school, you didn't make any money off of what the school made money from as far as Midnight Madness, any events such as Drake coming there. The list, I could name multiple things. I'll just factor it into the number one thing that's always looked at, which is schools who have jerseys that have your number on it and could possibly have your name or your likeness of you being in it. And the school is making money, but you're not making any money because it's illegal to pay you a stipend with restriction. Because there was an initial story that came up where they were looking to do stipends and give like money to players, and that came and went so fast it didn't even last that long. So things have changed, and I feel like they were working to get that implemented, but it didn't stick. So now here we are, we fast forward, and players want to get paid. And they look at it as, if someone's offering you money, if you come from a low income or an area where that's something that you wouldn't even have thought of or given the slightest bit of a glimpse of an eye to, you look at it as, hey, this money coming my way, word, I'm gonna accept this bread. I'm gonna keep it moving. As long as they find a way to keep it under wraps, I'm not complaining. The disadvantage to that is, as with anything, it always gets exposed and comes full circle, and that's basically what happened with these schools. Because of this happening, a lot of kids who were going to some top name schools have decommitted. They haven't, as far as doing the investigation, they've looked at schools, but they haven't really gone A to Z and looking at every single school. But I feel as though with time that will change. I'm waiting for the big schools to be part of this, because I know that the school being sponsored by Jordan, it's acceptable, but it's a definite one-off and something that I would never even think of. You look at North Carolina this past season. They won the national championship. Well, the kids who were there that are still on the team, who were part of the championship team from last year, along with any new incoming freshmen, if I'm not mistaken, were given shoes from Jordan for their personalized shoes that were for the championship game, or for them winning the championship. It's the give and take of it, as far as if gifts are being given and you're attending the school, it's okay. But if you have a business, then it's a problem. And this kind of ties into a story. I'm not sure if we talked about it on this podcast or not, where a player was earning an income while he was a student, and the school found out, and they pretty much kicked him off the team because he was already under the scholarship. So the question becomes, if you're a student, you run a business, you're not on a scholarship, that's acceptable. But because you're at school on a scholarship, you can't have a business because you're already getting money. You're already being financially provided by the school. And this also ties into the story we talked about a while back with LeVar Ball and LaMelo Ball. Because LaMelo Ball, as far as having his shoes, he can have his shoes. Now the challenge becomes, if the money goes to him specifically, he pretty much challenges his academic eligibility of going to UCLA. Because now it comes down to, if he attends the school, he would be attending, or he could attend the school and go there with no scholarship and see if he could get on as a walk-on to try to play for the team. But that's only if that option becomes available in that circumstance. So we'll keep an eye with this story. And I did mention this earlier, so I'll go ahead and give it a little bit more attention again. One of the names that they mentioned high-profile names. There were a lot of coaches who did catch a lot of heat for this. One of those coaches being Rick Pitino, who, and this was an odd circumstance. Rick Pitino was supposed to be fired by the athletic director. The athletic director never fired him. So what he decided to do was, he went ahead. The NCAA came in, and they went ahead and fired, released Rick Pitino, or had him on academic leave, or like a probation, not academic leave, but they had him on paid leave or whatever. And eventually Louisville was able to find a way to get the athletic director to be released, because you have folks who are over him, probably the school official or something of that sort, let him go. But it's tough, because now here it is, Pitino kind of scaved off clean from the situation with the sex scandal. If I'm thinking of that story correctly, that was his buffoonery and foolishness. So you walked away from that with no problem and everything's good. And now here it is, you go through this process, and you basically are at square one again. And the tough part of what makes the story, I think the biggest thing for me is what makes the story tough is now the next coach who's there as the interim coach has to come in so many words, I don't want to say run a clean program, but has to like try to phase or hide behind everything that's happened before him, like everything is fine, and it's really not. So Patino's Patino's a decent coach, but it's just a tough spot to be in at the time when all of this happened. And I feel like that's what's being skipped over or not acknowledged through all of this. So we'll keep our heads level with this story, and as I always share with you all, if I get more info, if anything, just share it with me. We'll if he comes back and gets another job, it would surprise me, but anything's possible. So who knows? So I talked about everyone locking arms, and actually Dallas and Rams are playing now. I will say this: I would never have thought that that fans would go to this extreme, but obviously, I always have been reminded that you learn something new every day. So DirecTV decided to go ahead and offer refunds to anyone who felt as though they were offended by the national anthem protest. Now, my $1 million question for this, when I first saw this story, is how can you prove that someone's been offended? Number one. And number two, even if they were offended, I understand that you're paying X number of dollars to watch, to get the NFL, but you're paying for the NFL game. So you're getting the game, but you feel it's in your best right or best judgment to sue the team or sue the sport, or the NFL network for that matter, because you didn't like what you were having to witness. And they're doing this as a refund, or doing the refunds because all of the protests that have been going on through the national anthem. The Wall Street Journal spoke with some DirecTV subscribers who indicated the same. I honestly didn't think I'd get a refund. I know their guidelines. I just wanted to make a point. Typically, customers are not allowed to downgrade or cancel their Sunday ticket packages once the NFL regular season starts, but the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg spoke to DirecTV service reps who indicated refunds will be given to people who cite the protest as their reason for wanting to end the service. So basically, if I have DirecTV, I call them and I say, "Hey, I'm satisfied with your service, but I don't want NFL Sunday ticket because of the protest. I'm going to get refunded." Which also then means I can't watch NFL other than through whatever personal choices you have for how you watch your TV outside of your local games that come on TV. The package itself is nearly $300. So if you look at how many people could call in saying that, that's a lot of money that DirecTV is losing for something that it's legitimate if you want to look at it as being a reason for canceling, but it's also an odd reason to say this is why I don't want my DirecTV package. So it is, as they mentioned earlier, the kneeling protest began starting from last year when Kaepernick refused to stand during the national anthem. Several other players then followed suit. Last week, Trump called for NFL owners to fight. So this is where it all kind of. So anyone who's wondering, well, what was the big uproar? What was the big deal with it before? The kneeling with Donald Trump, what caused it to be a huge trigger this year is with Donald Trump requesting that all NFL owners, that NFL ownership fire players who protest in such a manner, which basically was a way of the NFL saying, hey, if you're going to fire us, you're going to have to fire everybody. And it was kind of made as a big mark because Jerry Jones decided to take a knee with his teammates or with his team, and he's the owner of the Cowboys. So it was kind of like an unexpected unexpected / least expected type of process. The spinoff of this is that a lot of people, and I'm okay. I'm gonna say this, and I don't really even care who I offend in what I'm about to say because this is my podcast, and I don't give a damn. If there's any term that I feel like people should not use, I really don't like the term coon. I get the concept of people trying to use it and where they're going and saying it, but to call a person or an individual a coon for their decision and because of what they decided to, I don't want to say unbelieve in or convert their beliefs towards, that's just, I just get bothered with that. You have a right, like, I always say this all the time, you have a right to express and address whatever under any circumstances. That I have no problem with. Our problem comes in when you are giving someone a hard time for something that they made a decision to do because one moment they felt one way and they decided, oh, this time I don't feel this way and here's why. And it generates or causes this uproar that shouldn't really even occur to begin with. So I still, I get it. Like I said, as a fan, you want fair, clarity, equality, whatever across the board. But also we challenge someone because we place this expectation that shouldn't be placed in some circumstances, and we wonder why there's this distance in various situations. I feel as though Ray Lewis made his decision based on how he felt. Do I feel like it wasn't thought out properly, or do I feel like because it was it's just as tough as when, like Michael Vick went through what he went through, and then he made his decision in saying, about how Kaepernick should carry himself as a person. And it's like, yeah, Vic was saying that because now he's kind of been forced to rebrand and look at things a little differently now because he knows that he pretty much cost himself an NFL career based on a decision that wasn't even, it shouldn't have gone the way it did, but it ended up having him serve the time he did for being accountable for what he did right and or wrong in this case. So long story short in saying this, and I know I'm supposed to be capping this off and finishing up the story, but if with the refunds, if getting your money back is going to be the solution to avoiding the issues, then there's not enough money to go around. And I'll just leave it at that. So now we are segueing away from the sports. I'm surprised. Well, I ain't gonna say I'm surprised because with me, I always can run my mouth, even if I got a cold or not. But 57 minutes of sports, and I'm hoping I don't do too long with stuff, but I can't make any promises because we have a limited amount of stuff actually between Amazon, Twitter, GameStop, and our artist spotlight and unique ass of the week and pass of the week, and I'll get into those in a moment. So first tech story, and before I do this, because I did address this in one of my tweets on Twitter, and I know a lot of people may or may not follow me on Twitter or read Twitter, but I want to get some input about this. How do you feel about esports being implemented more into the podcast? I'm asking this because I know this past weekend I looked at Twitch, and there were a lot of esports events in Milan, in China. There was SoCal Regionals last weekend. So there's so many events that go on. Like, would people want to know who won these events or keep track of who's who in these events? Get personalities? Like, I want input on this. So if you are not doing so already, or if you have not done so, send an email to passpodcastbt@gmail.com. And I definitely want to get some insight and some input about that, because I really feel as though it's part of the sport, and it's still tech related, so it's not really a sports based topic. So I just want to see if anybody would like to know about any of the smaller events, or if it's only when the majors come, let's talk about those. Because I don't mind. I just want to get a kind of gauge out the crowd, and if need be, I'll do a straw poll. So when I go back and listen to the show, I'll request input for that as well. So the first story we have, Amazon has introduced, and I was, so before I give the story, I'm going to kind of give a backstory, because I always for me, for whatever reason, story time is always fun, and this moment is no exception. I went on Amazon's website because I currently own the original Amazon Echo. I personally don't have an issue with the Echo. I know a lot of people wasn't too fond of the Echo. At one point, I was one of those people who actually had my Echo set up to not pick up my voice. With time, I kind of accepted like it's not that serious. If it's information they're really going to retain, good luck. Hopefully you find something. But I would go on the website and I was like, why are there no Echo devices anymore? And I would keep trying to find different Echoes, and they would have like refurbished, or they were, kind of keeping things on the hush. And suddenly a story broke that I was able to find, and I got a little bit more information and some insight. The Echo speaker, which started in 2014, is finally getting a bit of a facelift. They've made various devices as far as with a camera. They have touchscreen. They introduced they've refreshed Fire TV. So everyone who initially has been on the Fire Stick flow for whatever reason, there's the Fire TV, which in my opinion, I think the Fire TV is competing with Chromecast Ultra as far as the Chromecast, because now they have a Chromecast that supports 4K TV. I think it's great. I have it. I mainly use it just to kind of Chromecast, to kind of stream various things that I normally don't watch on TV. So a few of the new devices that have been addressed is the Echo Spot, which is a smart alarm clock. It does have the ability to make calls. It can be connected to a speaker through cable or Bluetooth. It's kind of a mixture between the Echo Dot and the Echo Show, and it has a small screen on it. They have the Echo Plus, which it looks like the original Echo, but it now works as a smart home hub. It has the second generation far-field voice recognition. They've enhanced the sound. They use a program known as Zigbee, which is a low-power way of extending its wireless range. It's going to be slated as the same price as the original Echo. They've given an option for pre-orders for that. They have a few cheaper or more inexpensive Echoes. They have the smaller version of the Echo that is going to be for $100, and they're doing a 3-pack of Echoes for $250. So if you look at it, to buy 3 of them at regular price is $100. So to get 3 of them, if you bought them set like at their normal price of $100 a piece, you'd be paying $300. So to get $50 knocked off for 3 of them is not bad. And it's kind of, they're doing that so that way you have multi-room audio. And they're having different finishes and different colors for those, and they'll be coming out at the end of this month. There's also the $35 Echo Connect that you can use to make landline calls. Your phone number is going to be, your original phone number would still be tied to the calls, so that way people know it's still you. They're also introducing the Echo Buttons, which would be used as an interactive device for different games and activities that you can play, such as probably Jeopardy, any questionnaire, like if you do a question and answer thing, that would be set up on that option. Alexa is going to be mixing with BMW, so there'll be select many vehicles that are going to integrate the microphone itself inside the car. There also, as I mentioned before, there's a new Fire TV, which does support 4K HDR. video at 2160. Here it is. We just got accustomed to 1080. So, yay. So that's doubling 1080, obviously. It's still, and it'll support resolution at 60 frames a second. The Fire TV is slated at $70. It does come with the Alexa remote, so it's gonna be a bit of a larger difference from the initial Amazon Fire Stick. And they are confirming that the 3-pack of Echoes, and it's funny. I'm looking at the article now. Sometimes I don't like reading stuff that they have to T, because then you want to make sure you are interpreting it the way that it's supposed to be interpreted. They broke it down in stating that the 3-pack of Echoes cost $249 for $50 off, and not $50 per device, which logically makes sense, because that means you're paying $250 for all 3 of them, which means they're knocking $50 off the cost of that purchase. And that's kind of the easiest way to look at it. So the Amazon world is kind of changing for changing with the times for good reason. And I personally am impressed. So I'm looking forward to see more what Echo has in store for us with that. Now on to I would call, this is 2%, but this is also social media 2%. Twitter has been out, and I did not even realize this until just now. Twitter is 11 years old. And in the 11 years that Twitter has been in existence, they have always been known for one constant: 140 characters. Yes, there's TwitLonger. Yes, there's TMI.me. But on Tuesday, the trend has been changed. They're doubling the character limit to 280. So that means that, so how they set it up is, Twitter said on Tuesday that it would test extending the text limit of a post on its service to 280 characters. In effect, that would double the length of the first 2 sentences of this paragraph. Those sentences, for the record, add up to 140 characters. Twitter said the goal was to eliminate what it viewed as constraints that kept people from tweeting more frequently. One significant barrier, according to Twitter's internal research, has been the stringent limit on character count. Because basically, if you have anything that you're tweeting over 140 characters, you'll tweet the first tweet, and then you got to go back and tweet another message to send the second part of that first tweet. Some Twitter followers, as I've been reading on various social sources that we've shared on the podcast today, are still kind of hanging on to the actual 140 character process, because they have to send a message, and then in between they got to take a break and send the next part of the message to kind of do it as a reply to look like it's a thread. It's a significant moment for the 11-year-old Twitter. Has been trying to figure out how to change the social media service without alienating people. This is a small change, but a big move for us. 140 character was an arbitrary choice based on the 160 character SMS limit. Proud of how thoughtful the team has been in solving a real problem people have been trying to tweet, and at the same time maintaining our brevity, speed, and essence. Extending Twitter posts has been contentious internally, batted around among product groups that were trying to figure out ways to persuade people to use the service. You have about 328 million users on Twitter. It was criticized for its inability to attract more people. I'm not sure how many more people they need. A lot of investors have grown nervous based on the company's slowing growth of the company's revenue. Twitter did try extending character count by allowing GIFs without counting them against the limit. They also toyed with various posts exceeding 140 characters to proclaim that the limit was there to stay. We understand, since many of you have been tweeting for years, There may be an emotional attachment to 140 characters, the company said, but we tried this, saw the power of what it will do, and we fell in love with this new, still brief constraint. A lot of people think it's a terrible idea. In case anyone is wondering why 200 characters is a bad idea, it's because the tweet is now too long to fit on Twitter. As a result, Twitter said if rules around characters are loosened, English-speaking users who tend to use more characters in tweets will also hit character limits less frequently. That may in turn lead English-speaking users to post more regularly. It's going to be tested in small groups, so certain people will have access. They have different apps that you can try to get that attempt of tweeting over 140 characters. I've tried it; it didn't work for me, but it's not the end of the world. So in case you have been a techie guy and may or may not be aware, or a techie gal, you might not realize this, but Super Nintendo Entertainment System brought out their Classic Edition Mini on Friday. And the expectation of having multiple consoles in stock was a rumor. One store was expected, one of my friends actually works with a company that was expected to have many of these in stock, and turns out they didn't. They had 27 in stock, and there were, well, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. There were 27 that were in stock, and there were at least 50 to 60 people waiting in line to get one, which of course in hindsight means that the availability was not as many. No pun intended. So looking at the console and the rundown, they pushed back on the game selection. As many of you may or may not recall, the original Super Nintendo, the Nintendo, the NES Mini had 30 games on it. The SNES Mini has 20 games on it. They counted as 21 because they introduced Star Fox 2 as the last game that's introduced on the system. The story that I shared, it's stating that if you have not pre-ordered, you can try to get the system by just doing a walk-in and praying that the store has it. A lot of stores are not going to really have the system available because it is like pulling teeth. The hardest challenge now is most of the products. Someone asked me to address this with me and find it out. Well, now that the system is out or about to come out, how will it be looking to? What's the chances of finding one? And I'm like, to be honest, it's going to be slim to none. What's going to make it even more challenging is going to be those who go on eBay boosting the prices of having the system. The only challenge I look at with doing it from eBay is you want to make sure you're getting it from someone who's a reliable seller. Like if you're a first time, or if your profile on eBay has less than 20 sales, I wouldn't buy from you, or I wouldn't buy from that person. Of course, as you all know, I've looked at the system and thought it was great, but I have a system that does way more. So I really haven't looked at buying it. I don't know anyone who's personally bought it as of yet. Possibly, after it's been out for a while, see if there's anyone that has done reviews based on the games listed on the system. Side note, since I don't have it listed as a story, there was a game that was released called Cupheads. It has a 1930s feel to it, and it's a very unique game that I think a lot of people would like. My suggestion, don't download or play as of yet. Wait for them to get the bugs fixed as far as proper save points, because for whatever reason, the game is able to save your content to its level of saving, but it doesn't give you the ability to auto save or come up with save points within the game. And a couple of streamers I have been following have been making that clear either via tweet or through their Twitch channels. So now we're to our artist spotlight, and I did talk about her last week, so I try to make sure that I'm a man of my word. And the artist spotlight this week is none other than Jhené Aiko. She is the put it in the nicest way possible. She is the new it factor in the musical industry recently. We really weren't. You really didn't hear much talk about her early on because it was kind of a who is she and what makes her so special. Cassie, don't take this the wrong way. She reminded me of Cassie a lot when she first came out because I really didn't know whether her career would kind of last or if it would kind of be all right. She's here, she made it, and she's gone. To kind of give a background, she was born in L.A. She was, she was label mates with B2K under Epic Records. She was in a musical family. She made a group. She was part of a group called Girl, GYRL, which was consisting of her and her two sisters, Miyoko and Jamila. Aiko, she had plenty of music training, caused her to have success through various appearances on music videos and soundtracks. She took a hiatus to focus on education. 2011, she created a comeback mixtape called Sailing Souls. It was entirely written by her. Featured collabs with Drake, Gucci Mane, and Kanye West. She then signed with Def Jam through No ID's Artium imprint. She released the single 316, and following year she proved to be pivotal. She was featured on Big Sean's song Beware, teamed up with Drake for an appearance on his album Nothing Was the Same. In November of 2013, she released her first EP, Sail Out, which had the tracks Bed Piece and The Worst. The latter, which peaked number 9 in the Billboard's R&B chart. The album then generated 2 Grammy nominations, including Best Urban Contemporary Album and Best R&B Song for The Worst. For the song The Worst, I'm sorry. Sold Out, her proper debut album, was released the following September, and it then hit number 3 on Billboard 200. The album also spawned several singles, including To Love or Die, The Pressure, and Spotless Mind. She then collaborated with rapper Big Sean on the 2016 album 2088. And then she had multiple singles to follow. And then she brought out her full-length album called Trip 17. I will say, I'm going to say this about Jhené Aiko, and I'm probably mispronouncing it every time I say it, but I'm just me. I'm still in my learning stage. I feel like she's been doing nothing but coming into her own. And I'm sorry, the name of the album actually is called not Trip 17, but Trip. If you want a unique listen of music, I definitely would recommend checking out this album. You can tell she's went through her growing stage as far as having a kid, as far as love and relationships. She's, her and Big Sean have become a couple, and that kind of caused like a major change in approach, which is a good thing. I feel like you sometimes get forced into rebranding when you don't know that you have to rebrand, and that was the case with her. She just mainly put her head down and just focused and worked on her brand and worked on her grind. And I think now it's paying off, where it's not like, okay, she brought a single out, she brought an album out, we're not going to hear from her for another 4 or 5 years. And that's kind of how she's generated as an artist now, which I think I value even more as far as listening to her music in general. So, Jhené, keep making music. Like, you set the bar very well. I'm not going to say very high, because, she's still learning when it comes to the music industry. In music, you never should stop learning, and she's the proof of that being the case. So That's my main basis on artist spotlight for this week. All right. I didn't really know what to do or how to come up with anything for ass of the week, because ass of the week for me easily could have been Trump of the week, but I'm giving Trump a pass because if I did that, then I would literally have like the driest podcast and just annoying conversation piece related to it. I want to say something that's very funny. So I know last week I did mention, and I was going to do it this week, but I never did. That I was planning on getting some virtual coins for NBA 2K and attempting to work on building my character. Totally fine. Spending a little bit of money, I can understand. Because you might spend $20, maybe $30 on that to kind of get some coins to build, to help towards getting that possible ultimate player or whatever. That's not a problem. It's something. Now there are some people who will spend hundreds, if not thousands, on packs. Like they'll buy packs to build ultimate teams, and some of them never even do ultimate team that much. If you look at NBA 2K, you look at Madden 18, FIFA 18 that just dropped. By the way, I've mentioned this before. I will be possibly podcasting and working on streaming with that, and I've talked about that before, and I'll bring that up as it comes along. But I'm giving that story, and I'm talking about all of that to say this. And this will probably get me into the explicit content. And I know YouTube is very thorough about this, so I'm not gonna try to go too far with it. There is no way in hell that I will ever pay $1,000 for anything on any game under any circumstances. Case in point, Battlegrounds or Player Unknown's Battlegrounds has a virtual red bandana that you can get for the game, not in real life, for the game, for $1,000. You can pick one up in Steam's community market, a hub for users to buy and sell in-game items like weapons for for CSGO, and skins for Rust character. Right now, 80% of its most popular items on the front page are from Battlegrounds. Shirts, gas masks, and crates. I can see those being small transactions and small items. But $1,000 for a bandana in a game is a cutoff to me. There's no logic to me as to why someone needs a bandana that bad. I've seen people spend money buying cars for GTA that are not real cars. Or buying the cars and blowing them up and just doing stupid stuff. Like, no. Priorities, people. Like, come on, let's really think about this. One of the crates that people are selling on the market contains a red bandana. The Player Unknown's costume set, a loot crate that some players received earlier this year when they pre-ordered the deluxe edition of the game for $40. So when you were buying it then, if you pre-ordered, you got that crate with the bandana and never used it. So it was a $40. It was a $40 band. It was worth $40 because of the pre-order. Back in March, the Player Unknown bandana, merely a cosmetic item from that pre-order crate, was going for $20. And I'm sorry, I said 20. I said 40. I meant to say 20. That price spiked in July from $230, and then in September, $700, which didn't deter people from buying a couple dozen of them, according to Steam Marketplace's data. Yesterday, now this story was written on Thursday, so that says Wednesday of this past week. Yesterday, one sold for $1,015. So a well-timed $40 spent has earned some players hundreds more months later. However, it is most easily spent on other Steam items. Then they use the analogy that I really love. Unlike saving our old Beanie Babies, holding on to digital skins and games is becoming an easy and fast way to make bank. But if a black market or gambling economy emerges, like it did for CSGO, Battlegrounds might regrets its push for paid cosmetics. So I'll give you the CSGO lightened version of this story. CSGO has multiple skins for multiple weapons that are very creative, that a lot of people do auctions or just outright buy. And in some of those cases, depending on if you're a big enough CSGO player, I can see you buying it. But $1,000, like emphasis on but $1,000. Like, let's really break down the numbers and really look at this in hindsight. I don't see me spending $1,000 to get content for a game from something that was part of a pre-order, unless it's a benefit of nostalgic purposes. Like, that's almost, so to put it into my gamer perspective, it would be if NBA 2K20, we'll say 2K20, they may call it double X, we don't know. If NBA 2K20 came out and it had been 10 years since the original 2K10 came out, that had the feature for you buying the locker set where you could put all of the NBA games in, I'm not spending over $200 for that. Even then, that would be a lot, because that's not a product that has worthwhile investment, I guess I'm looking at it. But I get what they're trying to do, but this could have been done much better. Like, it could have been done much better. Just my personal opinion. But I mean, just like they always say, if it's a consumer and it's something they really want, price has no option. Or, they'll, by any means necessary, some people are going to do what they're going to do to get what they want. So I can't knock that whatsoever. I'll mention this and I'll leave it alone. As a consumer, if you're going to spend on certain items, know what you're signing up for before you spend it. Because once you hit buy or submit, you can't retract that purchase. It's bought. It's sold. It's yours. So keep that in mind when looking at various items or purchases made online. So this is kind of like this somber ending that I don't want to normally give, but I also have to be honest. Dude lived a long life. Hugh Hefner died on Thursday. I'm hoping I got the date right, because if I didn't, I'll be very devastated to not even have the date correct. Let me make sure before I go any further. Okay, let's try again. Take two. Hugh Hefner passed on Wednesday at the age of 91. He was at his home in the Playboy Mansion. He was 91 years old. Anyone who knows Hugh Hefner, Hugh Hefner was the branding of Playboy magazine. He created the Playboy magazine, and it turned out to be a media and entertainment industry giant that no one would, in their right mind, have expected to expand as far as it has. The introduction of this story kind of gives it to you in full perspective, and I'm going to read it just like it was written. Hugh Hefner, who created Playboy magazine and spun it into a media and entertainment industry giant, all the while as its very public avatar, squiring attractive young women and sometimes marrying them well into his 80s, died on Wednesday at his home, the Playboy Mansion in the Holmby Hills area of Los Angeles. Like I say, he was 91. The first issue of Playboy was released back in 1953. Hefner was then 27. Just let those numbers marinate. 27 years old was when this trend that is now a facet in its own word became such a big thing. He had only recently moved out of his parents' house, left his job at Children's Activities magazine, but in an editorial in Playboy's inaugural issue, the young publisher purveyed another life. The scene projected an era's premium boys style. Is part of an ensemble with the James Bond movies. John F. Kennedy swinging the guy who was young, vigorous, indifferent to the bonds of social responsibility. Long after other publishers made the nude Playmate centerfold, Mr. Hefner was reviled first by guardians of the 1950 social order, J. Edgar Hoover among them, and later by feminists. But Playboy's circulation reached 1 million by 1960 and peaked at about 7 million in the 1970s. Long after other publishers made the nude Playmate centerfold look more sugary than daring, Playboy remained the most successful men's magazine in the world. Mr. Hefner's company branched into movie, cable, and digital production, sold its own line of clothing and jewelry, and opened clubs, resorts, and casinos. It had faded over the years, its flagship magazine circulation declining to less than 1 million. He remained editor-in-chief after agreeing to the magazine's startling decision in 2015 to stop publishing nude photos. He handed over creative control to his son Cooper Hefner. Playboy Enterprises chief executive Scott Flanders acknowledged that the internet had overrun the magazine's provenance, which is kind of the reality. As far as on paper went, nobody else was doing it magazine wise. He was running circles around the game easily. Of course, and I say this on multiple podcasts, and I always will say this until I feel there's no need to say so. The internet is undefeated, and there's a reason it's undefeated. Magazines are great, but unless you're doing digital magazines that can keep a person's attention span for that period of time, you kind of fighting an uphill battle. The game just changed, and I mean he still was a Mac. Like he still got it. Like he literally had girls on girls who wanted him, and then to make matters worse, a lot of them who were centerfolds he got married to, and he was on like centerfolds like around his age, like they was young, like in 30s, 40s, because it was Hugh Hefner. It was the name, it was the market, it was his brand. They have pictures of various centerfolds from back in the day of certain magazines when it all first started. He went through his fair share of marriages. I'm just trying to like mainly get to the heavy hit. Christine Hefner, then the chairwoman and chief executive of Playboy Enterprises. That was his father, so she's still around. Playboy After Dark, he was generating part of that. One of his TV shows back in the 60s. Hugh Hefner was just an overall decent individual. Like there was never like any tabloid. Like I don't know. It's weird to me because tabloids for him was something that he really didn't come across too often. But in the long haul, he was true to his style. You knew what you was getting with him, and to kind of look at the hindsight of it now, he's mainly pushed his hardest to just continue. Like his legacy will be known, but it'll be for that era of digital, of public, like a physical print. Like I said, digital is, you always gonna fight. You have a fight with digital. Like what helps, and this will probably tie into my, as I call it, my personal closing thought. When you, and before I continue, condolences to his family, to those who were close to him. They will be having a ceremony for him for that. All of that will be listed in the article in the show notes. Like I said, and they have a very detailed, in-depth article. I don't want to read that article A to Z because it's so many. There's so many accolades and so many things that he accomplished as an individual that are unnoticed. It's 2017. I understand wholeheartedly that some people are still, to put it mildly, stuck in the times. That's okay. As long as you're stuck in the times, life is going to keep moving forward. Which in hindsight means you may not want to keep up with what's going on, but it's going on. Blogging is a trend that a lot of people did not expect to come off the ground as much as it has. Here we are now, a couple of years later, and blogging is still a big thing. Because there are a lot of people who do have their preference of reading and getting, or even on the other side of it, they have something they want to talk about and they need it written out, and it's their outlet. So I have no problem with that at all. Turning it to the other side, podcasting. At one time, people like podcasting is almost an easy way of doing book readings or whatever. Whereas if you were to have a book that you wanted to talk about, you could have a book, like literally the easiest way of doing, like for instance, I'm sorry, I'm stretching. If y'all heard that, I'm so sorry. Like that hurt me more than it hurt y'all. If you do to tie it back into a blog. If you write a blog, let's say you read a book, it was a book that you enjoyed and you want to give feedback on it, you can do a review, set it up, post it online, you'll get attention. Before that, we all would sit around and talk about the book, and you kept that conversation with each other, and that was it. Same apply with the media for Hugh Hefner as far as magazines. Magazines was a magazine. Doing digital was kind of like a hit or miss, because just like you could go and find his stuff, you could find other things. Going back to podcasting, and referring to books, you can sit a mic between 5 or 6 people, read a book, talk about the book, address different sections of the book, and then go into your details and breakdowns of what you did and didn't like about the book, turn it into a 5 or 6 part series. However you feel fit. Technology is where we're going. Even in my current line of work, it's the wake up call of learning that digital is where things are heading, if they're not already there. Don't miss what you see, wondering about what if and what could be. And I'm leaving that as a message to get, I'm not gonna say it like, first and foremost, I'm not on this whole tangent of older people need to stay woke. That's not what I'm gonna do. I understand that a lot of older people have the things that they like and the things that they enjoy, and I won't argue with that or knock it whatsoever. What I will say is, don't miss your mark and don't miss your opportunity trying to be someone that you're not, or worrying about something that you just can't control. I think we sometimes want things to work out a certain way, but we don't realize like doing so is not of the best benefit. So it's just something to keep in mind. But just keep things simple and work on the process accordingly, and don't take yourself through a whole lot of changes if you don't have to. Not really the most complete or extreme ending, but just a way for me to kind of flow with the process. I hope everyone, enjoys their day. It is Sunday. I'm going to go ahead and let you all know now, because I did talk about this a couple of weeks ago, and it's going to probably impact, if not this week, this upcoming week's episode, the following week. Shows are about to change as far as days. Still trying to iron out a solid date for that. The possibility will probably be recording one day, listening the following day. And I will probably change the intro based on that. But I just want to at least sit down and go over that with y'all. Because y'all know when it comes to listening to my shows, and especially if you listen and keep, this long and listening, I try to be as honest as I can in what I say. Because I know when you look at it as, when you say you're doing, I know a lot of folks who look at it as, when you say you were doing shows on Saturdays. Yeah, I do shows on Saturdays, but I also got to work with my co-hosts and vice versa. So all of those things get taken into account. Now that I'm working my new schedule, I'm working Saturdays, which means Saturdays are out. Now I got to figure out what day can I do it outside of Saturday. So it's just things that I'm thinking about and stuff that I'm trying to put in my head to put together to come up with a worthwhile show for you all. Believe me when I say I want this to be a great show. And I'm not just saying that just because I'm doing it, but I want it to be a great show, period. So that's what I have. That's what I got. And that's what I'm going to close with. If you are not already following, please check out past podcasts. I try to post more information between my past podcasts, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I am working a lot harder on getting those out there. If you're not already checking out the website, www.pastpodcast.com, you can go there and listen to any previous episodes. Still working on uploading shows. Have not forgotten that. Just been kind of in the zone and just work on just other things. And if I have not done so, I probably have mentioned her. The picture that you see that I'm using for the daily episodes, Chris Rock's amazing photographer. She helped me build up. I think working with her, between working on my confidence in general and then just working with her as a whole, has helped me to kind of get my brand in the direction that I've wanted it to go. And I don't regret anything from that. So that's my closing and my cap. I'll make sure as I listen to the show that I give her props in finding her website and her social media as well to give credibility. So that's what I have. I hope you all enjoy. Continue listening. Thank you so much. And until next time, the Past signing out. Peace. Did you make it to the end of the episode? If so, I do appreciate you listening and tuning in. These episodes get more and more valuable, and I do appreciate everyone taking time to sit down and listen to the episode. Whether you're actually listening to it once it's uploaded on Spreaker.com/Brate Podcast, or if you're downloading it and listening to it on your own convenience. If you want to check out any previous episodes, just check out that page. And if you'd like to inquire or provide any information or feedback or suggestions toward the podcast, please send those emails to pastpodcastbt@gmail.com. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Enjoy your day. Have a good week and be positive.